and Jan, you focused on geographic factors and neighborhood factors, and clearly these are very important. Adam, I think, touched just a little bit on individual behavior. I wonder if you might say something about what do we need to be doing to help people learn how to apply cognitive and behavioral strategies, and even though they may be poor and living in a neighborhood, that maybe they can make better choices even though the neighborhood may be forcing them in a direction.
That is an absolutely excellent question. In fact, we have a paper we're just about to submit to the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. If people value good nutrition, and if nutrition is important to them, that is the key factor that determines diet quality. So even they do go to a lower cost supermarket, that is not by itself a predictor of a bad diet. Attitudes are. So you're absolutely right. We mustn't give up on attitudes or nutrition education. They have to work together with the economic situation. And we're very impressed with the strong effect of attitudes and valuing of good nutrition and healthy diet.
Jean-Pierre?
Jean-Pierre Depré, Quebec Heart and Lung Institute. I agree with you. That was an outstanding session. Thank you very much. I learned a lot. Just a question for Dr. Froguel. Philippe, you know, you had a very short time to go through a very large topic, and you made some comments about the heterogeneity of obesity, and we often talk about obesity in a single, as a homogeneous entity, and you had this slide about, you know, this energy partitioning. There's probably a set of genes modulating energy balance, food intake, but there's also another set of genes also modulating energy partitioning. Could you comment further on this issue of healthy subcutaneous obesity? Because we put them in this homogeneous entity, but it's a different phenotype.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that we are far to understand, first of all, how what we eat act in our body, and how some people process differently the food they eat. Something I didn't mention is the role of the bacteria in our gut, which play a major role in this kind of nutrition partitioning, digestion. And people who are doing metabolomics now, they strongly believe that the signature of our bacteria, which is in part a reflection of what kind of food we eat, are quite important, not only for the development of obesity, but also for the development of the complication of obesity, what we call the unhealthy obesity, the metabolic syndrome, how the fat is distributed, especially in our liver, in our muscle, and how it's released from our adipose tissues. So I think it's a complex interaction between what we are, say, our genes, what we do, our environment, and what we eat, and our microbiota. So the bacteria that we have in our gut. So it's a kind of ménage à trois, and it's not because in Sofitel I speak about that, and I think it's quite important in the future to work more on this on the rules of this ménage à trois, especially with, of course, I didn't have time to speak about I think the microbiota is extremely important in the development of obesity, and is a strong driver. And the question of poverty is important, but it's clear also that where we live, antibiotics, we have received different kinds of factors that are quite important for the very early development of the microbiota.
But those environmental forces are going to lead to some healthy overweight and some forms of healthy overweight obesity, whereas for some others with just a little bit of weight gain stored the wrong place, the liver, the muscle, and so on, this will have tremendous deleterious consequences. So again, I think we need another framework. We need to go beyond BMI, in other words.
Oh yes, I'm totally sure of that.
I have also a question to both of you, actually, but maybe first to Philippe Froguel. Just to try to tie your both talks together, do you know if there are strong environmental differences in genetic susceptibility? In other ways, are the poor neighborhoods that Professor Drewnowski studies, are there more susceptible people for obesity than in other neighborhoods?
Yes, it's clear that in the poor part of suburban cities there is a huge prevalence of obesity, but also because it's a cluster of risk factors there. With a lack of physical activity, they are commuters, they have stress.
I mean also the prevalence of, say, FTO genes or something like that.
Oh, that's quite interesting. There are a lot of people who believe in the nil hypothesis of the thrifty genotype. That means that in some population have survived from famine, there will be some kind of survivor genes, and genetics have failed to prove that, which means that for FTO or the gene, there is no difference in the prevalence of the obesity gene anywhere.
Okay, but maybe assortative mating and things like that, they will lead to clustering of obese genes, maybe in certain neighborhoods, maybe.
That's a very interesting concept. I was trying to introduce this notion of a spatial nutrition epidemiology, where we know what people eat, but we also know where they eat it. And we can actually do cluster detection technique to see, for example, if people who eat salads or yogurt live in same neighborhoods where other people, their neighbors, also eat salads and yogurt. That actually is an interesting technique that the police departments use to detect crime, cluster detection, and we're using it for the first time in nutrition. So what you're suggesting is very interesting, because is there going to be a new discipline of spatial genetic epidemiology? I look forward to it.
For lipids, for instance, if you see families with hyperlipidemia, from hypercholesterolemia, people will sequence all the genes which are associated with that. They find that there is an enrichment in a rare mutation in families with high lipids. And we are just began to do this kind of work in obesity, and our first result support the idea that in these kind of families there is an enrichment of rare mutant with a relatively small effect of each of them, but all together segregating in family together, they are driver of the development of obesity.
Yeah.
Armando, you want to talk?
My name is Silvia Bugor. I'm the president of Price Foundation and the initiator of I'm Living Healthy movement. My question is that related to the fact that in Europe these days there is a debate to put a tax on unhealthy food or fast food. And I would like, from the perspective of your study, to know that related to the social economic situation of so big, important populations, the effect of a tax on this so-called unhealthy food or fast food will solve the problem of the obesity versus what we on the field realize the effect and the impact of informing the consumer and educating the child and the family from the first stage of his, let's say, birth?
Well, that's a very interesting and provocative question. I think that we know already that some of the unhealthy foods, well, foods viewed as unhealthy, I don't want to put things into categories, tend to be lower cost and are bought in lower cost stores and are consumed by lower income people who are obese. So for that reason, in epidemiology, it's very difficult to sort out the effect of a specific food and link it to obesity while accounting for all the other factors. And also, it's interesting that food taxes tend to be regressive, whereas our philosophy of taxation has been progressive, which means that the rich pay more. But here, in the name of public health, we're trying to make the poor pay more. So I think that this is a very interesting, again, intellectual dissociation between the principles of public health and the principles of progressive versus regressive taxation. And I'm looking forward to experts in legal theory to address this question, because it kind of goes beyond my capacity. I'm in favor of promoting nutrition education, promoting healthier choices, and promoting the ability to cook, because you can have a healthy, nutritious diet, provided that you spend a bit more time and know how to cook. Because if we have people with no resources, no money, no time, no skills, we're in trouble.
Armando?
Yes, Armando Barriguete from Mexico. Congratulations. And could we say that obesity is a protective factor?
Well, the protective factors in Seattle, and we hesitate, we've published 3 of our papers. So what you've just seen has been published in the American Journal of Public Health, Social Science and Medicine, and PLOS1. We're saying, and don't get me wrong here, that if you live in $1 million home and shop at Whole Foods, and if you're a woman, then it really doesn't matter what you eat. I'm taking it to an extreme.
Which is probably wrong, because genetically speaking, there are some variants that protect against obesity for at least one reason, because you are not hungry, because you feel food very quickly. And so the people who, for instance, who have a duplication on the chromosome 16p region, when they are infant, they often suffer from failure to thrive, and when they are older, they eat less than the others. That doesn't mean that it's good for health, because they die early, but at least they are protected against obesity. One thing, nothing related to obesity, we have developed in my group, related to genetics, we have developed in my group an algorithm to predict obesity in children at birth, at the age of 5, with a sensitivity of 85%. And there are different factors we use as a number of children, the weight of the mother, smoking, non-smoking, etc., etc. And one of the factors which is interesting is the distance of the house from the center of the city. And far higher is the distance, higher is the risk to develop obesity at the age of 5. So I have to say that this kind of device, in my view, first of all, is specific to a specific community of population. It's different in Finland, where we've done the study, compared to Boston, where we have replicated, at least in part. But it is possible, in my view, to predict what are the children at risk at birth. And I strongly believe that it corresponds to, if we want a standard deviation, it corresponds to about 20% of the population and of children, and I think it would be very important to concentrate the effort on these children.
I want to pick up a comment on this, because I agree completely. Let's go back to the distance from the center of the city predicting obesity in children. In real estate, there is a saying, you drive until you can afford the mortgage, and then you stop. So yes, property values, obesity in children, absolutely.
Not in New York.
Philippe Froguel and Jan Vinck, how do you conciliate, the behavior and genetics?
Well, I think they are different in this sense that genetics primarily are responsible for differences between individuals, and that environments and behavior are more important for the evolution of weight and for the problem of obesity in the long term and in populations. Because apparently, even when in an obese population that is generally obese, there are large individual differences, and they are largely related to genetic variables, I think. One of the intriguing questions is, by the way, the question whether or not genetic variables change as people change their behavior. And that might be also an intriguing element. But I would like to hear your answer to the question of Emile.
Thank you very much for your last comment. Probably 99% of you believe that one of the reasons why genetics is not important in obesity is because the genes don't change. Mm-hmm. That is untrue. That is absolutely untrue. First of all, we know there's not only the rare mutations, there is the structure variant, and the structure variant move very fast in human beings. And secondly, there's some very strong evidence now that some region of the genome, have evolved in the last 10,000 years because they are strictly associated with the development of agriculture, the starch we eat. And there are some regions where there is some different number of copy of genes of enzyme which are necessary for digestion of starch, for instance, like amylase. And there's a huge difference, the number of copy between the traditional African tribe and the Japanese, for instance. And more starch you eat at the level of population, larger the number of copy of this gene. And there's some good evidence that these kind of genes are quite important for the metabolism and probably for development of obesity. So yes, there is an evolution of the genome, which is more important than what we used to think, and that is related to the change in our environment.
Yes, thank you very much for that very interesting and very informative presentations. I have one question for Adam, actually. Adam, you mentioned that the differences in obesity rates by supermarket shoppers are seen despite the fact that fruits and vegetables are cheaper in Safeway than in Whole Foods and some of the less expensive grocery stores and the more expensive grocery stores. I'm wondering if, as part of that, you've looked at the price of healthy food to average income ratios in those different shoppers, and what you found, if you did.
That's an interesting analysis. No, we have not done that yet. I should specify that we're looking at the supermarket choice as another previously unexplored aspect of socioeconomic status. Because if you're a Whole Foods person, that's a different thing than if you are, an A&P or an Albertsons person. But both stores have got healthy foods. And yes, we want to look at the quality of the diet among shoppers in all those stores, again, geographic location, and you're absolutely right in relation to incomes. Thank you for the question.
Okay, with that, I would like to thank all the speakers.
One more. Just one.
I thought the last question was just announced.
No, one more short question.
Okay,
My name is Pauline Cantor. I'm from Chile. And I have a question for Adam also. We just passed a law in Chile, in the Congress, where they will prohibit to sell foods in schools that are high in sugar, in fat, and in sodium. So we wanted to know what your opinion was on those types of laws.
Very short.
When we go into schools and children and adolescents, then I do support schools being a commercial-free zone. This is the policy in Seattle, and I see nothing wrong with taking commercials out of schools, especially middle schools and schools generally. But it's a different situation from the marketplace where adults go to supermarkets. So schools are a special issue, and you can discuss that further.
Okay, well, it shows there's a lot of active interest in this.